Thank you so much for this opportunity to have this lightning talk with everybody that is present. I am Akindele Akinyinka, presenting on behalf of all other authors for this presentation. We'll be talking briefly on measuring educational stakeholders' preference for remote proctored examinations in higher education. We all know how important assessment is to teaching and learning, especially in tertiary education. We've always been using different forms of assessments to gauge our student progress and to see or to measure how they have grasped the subject content. And for centuries, ever since education had been in play, pen to paper had mostly been the most employed form of assessment delivery to evaluate our learners. But as technology improves, as new technology comes on board, then there is introduction of new ways of measuring our learners through digital assessments. And ever since this technology has been in place, there has been too little adoption of this technology worldwide, with most people that are actually using it, using the basic forms such as the multiple choice questions assessing our learners. Now, when COVID hit in early 2020, a lot of institutions worldwide had to migrate, had to implement digital assessments as a way to test their learners, given the fact that face-to-face is no longer possible. A lot of a lot of the adopters then had no option because that was the only way to go forward. But after the COVID was over, what happens to these technologies? Are people still willing to use them with emphasis on the technology called the remote proctored examinations? What is exactly is a remote proctored examinations? Remote proctored examinations is a modality of exams that allow a learner to take an exam from a remote location. But we still need to put in place tools, techniques, and other things that will prevent or that will stop cheating in this kind of examinations. So with RPE, several technologies were created to monitor the students while they are doing it. One of the features of RPE is monitoring the screen or the webcam through the webcam of the learner. We can also monitor the microphone to record all background noises or background discussion. Facial recognition is also one of the technology that was implemented where the intended participant's face is scanned and compared against the images that had been in the institution database. Then some advanced features were also introduced, especially in AI proctored tools, where the posture of the participants can be measured, the angle of their neck and the way they sit and so on can be monitored. Some other features such as browser lockdown that allow only what they're doing at that instance to be monitored. So during COVID, a lot of these technology were proliferated. There are several of them, and several institutions actually adopted them for use to monitor or to assess their learners. Our institution, Ladoke Akintola University of Technology in Nigeria, we also adopted this technology during COVID as a way to assess our learners. But after COVID was over, we realized that there are several of these technologies just went down, while use of video conferencing tools like Zoom, like Teams, and other simplified versions were retained. Some other technologically advanced tools like RPE start fading out. So the aim of what we did or this study was for us to understand the reason why. We wanted to look at the preferences of several stakeholders within an higher education system in a situation where they are not being co-opted, they are not being forced, they are not being mandated to use this technology? What is going to be your preference? You still want RPE or will you not? So our objective is to identify the factors and the constraints that will influence the behavioral intentions of these stakeholders. We are talking from the academic staffs to the non-academic staffs and to the students and every other kind of stakeholder that is involved. Several research has been done to look at why uh, uh, stakeholders have been hesitant in adopting RPE. For example, Alexio and Mexinda in 2021, they reported that from the student perspective, there had been mixed opinion, and from the staff perspective, mostly it had been negative because faculty and academics administrators see it as time consuming, look at security perspective and so on and so. But we want to look within our own environs. For example, within Nigeria and within technology universities that are implementing distance education, if we were want to implement remote proctored examinations, what will be our constraint? And if we can tailor our policies to address this construct, then it will give us a good insight into where to focus our effort. So to gauge or to come up with our model that will be used in assessing these preferences, we hybridized two technology acceptance models. We examined several technology acceptance models like TAM, like UTAT, and so on and so forth. We see while their constructs are good, there is no single construct or single model that actually covered what we were looking for. Because of this, we hybridized two technological acceptance models. We use the innovation division theory and we use the version 2 of the unified theory of acceptance. So we use this to form a survey, which we deployed via Google Survey as our instrument toward our parties. So from the hybridization of these two technology models, we came up with 8 constructs, which we deemed sufficient that should be able to measure the preferences of our different stakeholders towards their behavioral intention in adopting this RPE technology. We were looking at their performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, image, hedonic motivation, price value, personal innovativeness, and facilitating condition. Like PE, EE, FC all comes from UTAT, while image, personal innovativeness, price value came from IDT. So we hybridized these two models together to measure our behavioral intention. We also took cognizance by taking the demographics of our participants. For example, their age, their gender, their area of specialization, their years of service, their ranks, and so on and so forth. So the hypothesis that we formed is that we want to look at how performance expectancy or effort expectancy or any of the 8 constructs that we have come up with it positively affect the behavioral intention to use remote proctored examinations. And for the survey that was administered, we had a total of 197 respondents across different specializations and different ages. This description of the data we were able to acquire from the respondents, we had about 67% students and 33% staff. We had 40% female and 59.4% male. Their age brackets, their ranks from a professor to the non-academics were also considered. We look at their area of specialization, those that are already from IT, those that are from earth sciences, from education, and so on and so forth. Now, after we got all the responses from all the respondents, we first performed what we call the reliability test. We check that these constructs that we took from these 2 different models Are they actually reliable? Will they give us what we are looking for? And we use crankback alpha to measure our reliability. So what we realized from this is that the most probably correlated or the most reliable of all of these is the performance expectancy, which came close to 1. And according to Crankback Alpha, which uh, look at constructs that the acceptable rate is from 0.7, there are some authors that says 0.6 is reliable. But from our test, we ruled out facilitating condition because it only gave us a value of 0.148. So for every other further analysis that we did on the data that we collected, we expunged this facilitating condition out of the data, given the fact that shows that it is not actually reliable for our further analysis. So after that, we performed correlation analysis on on the data that we have collected. And from here, each of these constructs, we saw that performance evaluation, effort expectancies are actually one of the most correlated of the constructs. Then after that, we performed regression analysis on the data that we collected. And from here, the R-square value of the most important of the construct which we had deemed to be the performance expectancy, the effort expectancy, and the social influence. It gave us to a R-square value of 0.692, which means that 69.2% of the change or the behavioral intentions of the respondents are only being really affected by 3 of the constructs. All of the other constructs, while they are also significant, their impact is not as important as this first B construct that has been evaluated. So given the fact that what we were looking for is to actually see that which of our construct had a stronger significant relationship with the behavioral intention of the participants, we concluded to say that performance expectancy, social influence, and personal innovativeness are the most important factors when RPE is to be adopted among several stakeholders. So with this, we come with a recommendation that institutions that really needs to promote the adoption of RPE needs to focus more on these 3 constructs rather than all the 8 that we have mapped out. We need to tailor policies, activities, app development, and any other kind of activity that we increase performance expectancy, social influence, and personal innovativeness across all stakeholders. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Akindele, for that very comprehensive piece of research that you've undertaken on this. If you stay online, we'll do the next lightning talk and then come back to questions. And I think just tying up and bringing Akindele into this equation as well. Akindele, what is perhaps your experience with institutional support for digital educators in Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good.
Okay, I can only speak to my institution, which is LAUTECH Nigeria. When it comes to institutional support, actually we have been getting a lot of support from the institution and the management. A typical example is our tapping into the Association of Commonwealth, which had allowed us to be able to promote several of activities we are doing. We also had a lot of workshop institutional-wide. So in terms of institutional support, it had been there. But the same cannot be said for acceptance level of the staff members. You know, people sometimes are a bit slow to change. So while institutional has been given a lot of support, acceptance of the staffs, even sometimes the students has not been as forthcoming as expected.
Yeah, because I guess in that same equation, we are worrying about the inequities that will increase as we expand our digital education role. I mean, certainly hearing what's happening in the AI front and tying up with what Akindele was also saying with proctoring, it almost brings up the question is it already outdated to proctor? Because AI can interfere with so much of that proctoring mechanism, isn't it? Any further questions or comments? Yes, please.
Can I ask, do you think higher education is entrenched by the investment that we've previously had that is holding us back for the future? And by that, what I mean is, if you look at all of the primary schools and the junior schools that went online through COVID, most of them jumped on a Microsoft Office Teams platform to teach. They didn't invest in a VLE, they got collaborative tools, they got whiteboard tools, they got chat tools. Yeah. As institutions, higher education institutions don't seem to be wanting to jump into that Microsoft tool. You know, I'm trying to get my institution to get a space for students and staff to work collaboratively, just as teams. It could be Google, like just we're a Microsoft site. And for me, it's a no-brainer, but there seems to be reticence because, well, we've got a VLE that we've invested in. We've got a set of people who know how to run it. That doesn't matter. I've got a set of academics who know how to run teams because that's what the institution runs on. And it all seems to be a good excuse rather than somebody actually just jumping both feet in and said, let's try it.
Just a note about this as well. So I'm involved in a digital project, digital campus project in the University of London. And I'm trying to kind of investigate and learn how the Teams and Office 365 can be implemented in the current sort of online distance learning which we offer. And the first question is, which capacity, for example, team can be used? So because we have a very well established virtual environment model where all our courses are versus Teams, which is hopefully being developed more and more, and for example, more applications being developed, and just quite recently, new application Teams class was offered, and then it becomes kind of quite difficult to make a decision because they kind of not contradict and not at the same time complement one another. So this is a dilemma for us. You know, we have to kind of make a decision which part of the course will be run, for example, in the VV, or which part will be used in the Teams. So, and nobody can give us kind of advice, piece of advice. We're making assumptions. So, because thinking, okay, Teams, it's more kind of collaboration, maybe more for communication, whereas the VV it's more like a hub for holding learning material, this sort of things. But again, we don't know yet because we haven't actually implemented this yet, you know. So, and eventually, hopefully, we will have a pilot to be able to do that. So, we need a proper kind of data, gather this data to kind of evidence saying yes, so we're in the right direction. So it's not easy to find how the other universities already come through this kind of process. So I'm trying to gather information, and I literally receive kind of mixed messages. Some universities embraced it and said, yes, that's wonderful. So we're using Teams exactly as they say. But others said, oh, well, we don't have a proper direction. And that's why we have mix and match and literally chaos in some universities. That's what it is, you know, so because this must come kind of centrally, or some kind of decision must become centrally, and guidance must be given to educators how to use it, not like leave them to their own devices and say, okay, now experiment and think how you can sort of use this specifically piece of technology, achieve the learning outcomes, you know. So that's what actually happens, unfortunately, at some universities. So we try to avoid this. We try to make it more kind of streamlined, you know. But again, it's the first steps. So I have to say, it's a challenge.
Yeah. And I think we share that challenge with you. Jonathan, you had your.
Yeah, I think the issue that we're having at the moment, I believe, is that we are at the point where everything has been disrupted. And we don't know where novelty lies and whether the actual effects around the changes of this technology is associated with. Because, you know, pre-COVID, as we know, all of the educational technologies were struggling to get buy-in. And then COVID has compelled teachers to kind of went online, even parents for children, right? They were suddenly trying to get hold of this technology and trying to grasp how to use this. Because their children say, I can't get online, that's it. You know, but they have to get their children online to be able to join the class. So there's that, and then now we're in the pandemic period, these things have changed again. And it's not being talked about as to whether showing all students, back in person in terms of the conventional universities, right? The ones who deal with in campus. But even this kind of themes that you talked about, it keeps on changing. So the kinds of readiness that teachers have, you don't know where you're ready and when you are ready. I'm a technologist myself, instructional designer. I learned the technologies by heart. But even myself, I'm using Teams and suddenly, oh, where's it gone? Right? And it just throws you off completely. And you then stick to what's exactly you're used to, which is kind of like, I'm just going to share my screen. And that's it. I'm just going to do my lecture. Because going through all of these apps that's available, not considering all of this licensing model that now we're going into, right? You go to one app, suddenly they're saying, oh, that's additional module, you'll pay another 10 pounds on top each month. So I think these are the problems that we're experiencing now.
I think it's certainly make that last question or
So
so.
then you find that teaching through a virtual environment then is so one direction. Where's this collaborative learning, this discovery learning? Our students can teach you so much. Yet we haven't found a platform for them to share anything with us.
Yeah.
We put them in a forum, we put them in a webinar, they can put their hand up and speak. But we don't work like that as academics or as senior leaders. We all share, we work on documents together, we collaborate. Our students, for those that are apprentices or out in industry, are already doing this.
Yeah.
We are sat in the dark ages of pre-1980.
I know as well. I just wanted to say, I guess it depends on what pedagogical underpinnings are pushing you towards particular technologies and digital texts. Because when you just mentioned about collaboration and how we do it, but our students aren't, I was just thinking, actually, I get my students to collaborate in documents. So I'll give them a shared document and they can annotate together. And I put them into small groups to annotate and then they present on what they've annotated and they find the keyboard. So I think it depends again on how you want to use it, but it does, I recognize it as a lecture. It means some of the material I would like to cover, I don't get to cover. I have to be much more selective because you're time framed in a different way. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah, the nice thing about face-to-face, if something happens on your way to work and you walk into your lecture field, you can talk about it. But online, that instantaneousness has disappeared from you, and that shouldn't be taken away because we are completely instant online. Because as soon as something happens, Twitter or Instagram or somebody tells us it's happened. Yeah, as educators, we're not harming it.
That's a challenge on which we shall finish this session, because I do think this is where we are all growing, learning, growing at quite a pace. So thank you very much to all our speakers. So thank you.